Good afternoon. Whoa, they talk. Okay. I'm going to talk very briefly today about proposing to you that I think we need to fundamentally change our paradigm and how we do economic development, and we need to change that, I think, because the world that we often structured our economic development approaches around doesn't really exist anymore. Now, I come out of that background on a very personal level. I grew up in a family that owned a small paint factory in Ohio. So you want to talk about manufacturing, you know, I've been there. As I've worked in economic development over the past 20 years, it's become one of the things I continue to think about is that we think about economic development as big game hunting. You've heard that model before, but I want to focus on one piece of it, which is that gun. You can only point a gun at one thing at a time. And that's been typically the way we've done economic development. Now, back in the day when we had factories with thousands of people and we had a small number of those in our communities, that probably made sense because we could focus right in on 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 businesses. It was logistically, organizationally feasible to have that kind of one-on-one focus. However, today, we all know that the size of small businesses, or the size of businesses, has been consistently declining over the past 10, 20 years. And today we're dealing more and more with an environment where instead of having 5 or 10 large businesses, we have hundreds of very small ones. We've been thinking about doing economic development as being like one of those machines in one of those factories. You put a raw material in at one end, you twiddle the controls, and something good comes out the other end. My proposal to you is that I think we need to start thinking about how we do economic development as being more about an ecosystem. What's the fundamental difference between a machine and an ecosystem? There's a lot of them, but one of them is that the pieces of an ecosystem are interdependent upon each other. Now, we don't just think about independence in economic development, our businesses think about that too. We all have this tendency in the US to think of ourselves as cowboys. I'm tough, I could do it, I could take care of myself. But in reality, whether it's your organization with its fewer and fewer people and fewer resources, or it's those businesses, we're all trying to be chief cook and bottle washer. And at some point, we can't do all of that. So I think we need to think about shifting from that one-on-one focus to how do we facilitate, how do we cultivate an ecosystem, that interdependence among the elements. What does that look like? Well, part of that looks like tools. Now, we talk a lot of times in economic development about tool sets. I would propose to you that one of the things that we need to think about is how do we enable those businesses, especially those small ones, to have a more robust tool set. They don't always know what they need. Two populations that often don't know what they need are 1099ers or freelancers who are trying to be chief cook and bottle washer, or people who are retiring, people who are approaching retirement. And there's some studies indicating that more than a third of entrepreneurs in the US, or a third of small business owners, are over the age of 55. And a lot of times they haven't figured out realistically what they're going to do next. There's a bunch of things that we can provide as tools for those folks. A couple of simple ones are small spaces to collaborate in. If I'm trying to get out of being chief cook and bottle washer, I need places where I can work with others. Another is very simple, small places to get started. This gentleman had a space of about 30 feet square in a market. He's now has 3 restaurants. Essentially, what we need to be doing is thinking about how to knit those entities within our communities together. So it's not just about us, but it's about creating a system where it works together. It's stronger because it's fitted together. What does that look like? I don't exactly know yet. I'm still figuring that out myself. But something like this is probably a pretty good sign. And I don't just mean sign because it's a sign. It's a good sign. I used to do a talk where I described entrepreneurs as being like cockroaches. You put out good food for them and they'll just come out of the woodwork and come and eat it. And I'm getting away from that, actually. It's still a fun picture. But what we need to do is help these people not be banging their heads and understand how to work together. Thank you.